Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of From the Ground Up. Real-time issues with real-time solutions for MWBEs, sponsored by Queen Strategy Partners, Nicole Valentine Esquire, Danielle Douglas, and myself, Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant. We have enjoyed our journey together through this COVID climate, this new reality that we're experiencing, and we appreciate that you've given us such great feedback on what you've been hearing from all of our expert guests that we have been featuring. And remember, we moved to every other week for this fourth quarter. So our next show will be airing a week after today, and you can catch all of our replays on our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, Queen Strategy Partners. So we appreciate you being here. We are What We Speak, a collaboration of 3 independently owned, minority women-owned businesses coming together, knowing that collectively we can have more of an impact in the marketplace, and learning and growing and expanding our reach through collaboration has been a wonderful experience and gives us an opportunity to serve small businesses and MWBEs. So thank you for your participation. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for catching the replay, and thank you for sharing it out. So if you tuned in today, this is a show that you definitely want to share. Just click the share button, share it out, and let others know, because what we covered today could really help them and influence the trajectory of where their business goes for the fourth quarter. But without further ado, I get to do what I love to do every Tuesday on our show, which is introduce my dynamic, beautiful, fantastic co-host who is having a birthday today, Danielle Douglas. Woo!
Thank you, Stacey. And as I always say, what would I do without you? Thank you so much for always giving me a fabulous introduction. I love you immensely. And with that said, today's topic is, what are the benefits in joining a Chamber of Commerce? You know, Stacey, myself, and Nicole, we really try to be intentional about the guests that we bring to you week in and week out, and the topics that we bring to you week in and week out. And we really thought that understanding the benefits of the Chamber of Commerce is really important, because the Chamber of Commerce, they serve really an important role for businesses in their communities. They are, for lack of a better word, an anchor institution, right? In so many ways, it's an opportunity for business owners to get resources, to network with one another, to identify other business owners that you can potentially collaborate with, or, you know, just share resources. And so we thought that it would be really important that we bring 2 fabulous guests on to really talk about the benefits of their respective chambers of commerce. So without further ado, we want to introduce our guest today, Tuesday, September 29th, Kenya Abreu. Hi, Kenya. How are you?
Hi, Danielle, and happy birthday.
Thank you. And Tom Gretsch. Yes. So I'm going to have the
Miss Douglas.
Miss Douglas. Tom, what are you talking about?
Well, today's your birthday, and happy birthday.
Oh, okay. So I get it. I turned a year older, and now I'm Madam, Miss Douglas. I'm not that old yet, Tom.
Yeah.
I get sick and tired of saying thank you, young man, and thank you, young lady. You understand. It's great to be here. Thank you.
You know what? Today, I could use a young lady.
Yeah.
You got it.
Exactly. But this is exciting to just have both of you here, as Danielle said, and just for her to be here on her birthday. I'm totally biased. Like, this is my sister, and I just want her to feel celebrated and loved. This is the only work she's allowed to do today, because it's her birthday, and we want to make it a joyful interaction. So we're going to introduce our guests and tell you a little bit more about them. So Kenya Abreu is the president and CEO of New York Women's Chamber of Commerce. And it's a non-for-profit membership organization dedicated to empowering and fostering the economic advancement of women through business ownership, micro enterprise, and self-employment. She's a dynamic Latino woman, born in the Dominican Republic, raised in New York by a village of women. And she learned at a very young age by investing in women's economic empowerment. That's the key to opening doors that leads to gender equality, poverty eradication, and inclusive economic growth. In 2002, inspired by women entrepreneurs who wanted more than just a networking from an organization, she came together with a group of business women and community leaders and founded the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce. The Women's Chamber became the first women's chamber of commerce in the city and the state of New York. And today the organization counts more than 7,000 members, has provided technical assistance and training to more than 20,000 entrepreneurs, assisted with the creation of more than 10,000 new businesses, and aided entrepreneurs in raising and accessing capital in excess of 45 million and 65 million in procurement contracts. Do you think the Women's Chamber has been working? But she's a highly respected advocate for equal opportunity for women and minority entrepreneurs because she worked closely with elected officials and community leaders to ensure the growth and success of small business in the city and the state of New York. She was instrumental in the passing of Local Law 1 and Article 15A, and she is a member of the MWBE advisory boards for Mayor de Blasio, Department of Education, School Construction Authority, and she was recently appointed by Governor Cuomo to the New York Forward Reopening Board to help guide the state with its reopening strategies during COVID-19. And she's my friend. So I'm excited to have her here. Welcome to the show. I'm going to turn it over to Danielle.
Oh my goodness, that was long, Stacey.
Yes, you need them to know. That was some background that they need to know who's on the show.
Well, you know what? See, Tom, I get to pay you back because I'm introducing you. And so I have the opportunity to introduce Mr. Thomas J. Gray. He was appointed executive director of the Queens Chamber of Commerce in July of 2015. And on November 1st, 2017, Tom became president and chief executive officer of the Queens Chamber of Commerce. Tom's career has spanned the printing and publishing industries over the past 25 years with R.R. Donnelley and Sons Company, Merrill Corporation, and Sony DADC. His other activities include being past president of the University of Scranton National Alumni Society Board of Governors, trustee of the Village of Malvern Public Library from 2007 and present, and board member of Tomorrow's Hope Foundation from 2012 to 2020. And Tom, this is just to name a few. He has served in the capacity of board member for other organizations and co-chairs. And so without further ado, we like to introduce Mr. Tom Gretsch and say also, this is important, that he is a local resident of the Queens community. He's a resident of Malvern, New York, originally from Astoria, Queens, and he's a graduate of University of Scranton, PA with a BS in accounting, and he received his MBA in international business from Manhattan College, Riverdale, New York. So again, I want to say without further ado, we introduce Mr. Thomas J. Gretsch. How's that, Tom?
Thank you so much, young lady. That was just terrific. Thanks again.
Thank you. So we're going to ask the first question to our lady guest, Kenya. Tell us, how does your chamber operate?
Well, the chamber has several areas that we really focus on. One is, of course, our membership, our programs and services that we provide to not only members, but also to those business owners that are not member, because we not only provide services to members, we have a whole series of benefits and programs that are just for members, but we have programs that are open to all business owners, especially to our MWBE community. So we have our MWBE Center under the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, and we also have our Micro Enterprise Institute that is dedicated to working especially with small businesses that are owned by women, such as the beauty salons, restaurants, retail stores, And our MWBE, of course, those programs are dedicated to those firms that are women and minority companies that wants to get certified or certified with the city and state and want to do business with the city and state agency. So we have a lot of services for them, as you know, Stacy. And one of the things that we do also is, help, especially women start their own business. If they're looking to start a business, they can come to us for services as well. And one of the things that we do also is the advocacy part. We advocate heavily on behalf of our women entrepreneurs and also our minority business owners. That's one of the things that we do a lot that people don't see, because we are constantly working, as I'm sure Tom also knows about this. We are heavily working, especially now during COVID-19, to make sure that our businesses are open, that our businesses are operating. A lot of the things that happen, a lot of the changes that you've seen happening to allow them to reopen, it is the work of people like myself and Tom and others that makes that happen. It just doesn't happen like that. We do have our, the governor and the mayor working to make it happen, but we are the ones behind pushing to make sure that it is done, that our businesses continue to operate, that our businesses are being allowed to reopen again and to, move the economy forward in these times.
And Tom, how does the Queens Chamber of Commerce
So I
operate?
think now, and maybe this sounds a little self-promoting for chambers of commerce in general, but now in these horrible times, economic times, is probably the best time to be part of a chamber, right? So we represent over 125,000 Queens-based employees throughout the entire borough of Queens and beyond. I want to touch base on two different things. Number one is on the issue of diversity, right? So I've always believed that the David Dinkins comment back when he was the mayor about the gorgeous mosaic of New York, all the bits and pieces of the colored glass that fit together to make a mosaic. I love that expression, and I try to live by it in my daily life as well as how we run the chamber. So when I inherited the chamber 5 years ago, we had some diversity, and I give credit to my predecessor for that. But I like to think we put it on overdrive, right? So over the last 3 years, we've changed the board composition about 50%. So now I have women of color, I have men of color, I have Asian folks, I have women in general, right? I do believe in that gorgeous mosaic. So it's important to note, if somebody looks at it as a staid, old, established in 1911 organization, trust me when I tell you things have changed. I can show you pictures of 300 stodgy old guys at the Pierre Hotel smoking cigars in 1911, 1912. And since then, we've educated, we've advocated, and we network. I took that and changed it with the times, right? So the ways we did it then obviously are different today. But I want to talk for a minute about restaurants. Some people have said to me, Gretch, you have this like obsession with restaurants. I love to eat, number one, okay, no question, which is a good thing for our restaurant scene. I think I'm single-handedly going to bring some of them back to life. But on a serious note, if you're of color, if you're an immigrant, if you're a woman, whatever it happens to be, and when you come here and you get a job, you don't need to speak English. You don't need to be educated and have a GED to go wash dishes, peel potatoes, make a salad. So the restaurant industry has become the first rung on the economic ladder. And you look around Queens County, especially, the people that run the door, one of my favorites I go to with Hope Knight all the time, right? Mama's Empanadas, a diner, a deli, whatever else. Chances are the person that runs and owns that place started out doing one of those menial tasks. I also suggest in this difficult time that all of our workers out there are essential workers. If I got bills to pay and I peel potatoes and I got 2 or 3 kids, to my family, you bet your bippy I'm an essential worker, right? So while we do offer respect and props to all those in the healthcare field that got us through this terrible time, I want to also have a conversation with folks about our workers today are all essential to themselves, their families, and their communities. Queens County has 6,000 restaurants. It is our fear, our great fear, that up to half of those will never again see the light of day. Half. There's 27,000 Citywide, my friends in Manhattan talk about 65% never opening up again. So we got to do all we can to help them. And one of those things is, number one, in my opinion, is the Restaurant Act of 2020. It's $120 billion. It needs to be done nationwide to get this done. We've been lobbying and advocating strongly with our great leadership from the Queen's delegation, including led by Greg Meeks, Tom Swazi, Grace Meng, Nydia Velasquez. Get it done. They're back in D.C. We know there's other pressing issues. That needs to be done. And then my last point about that is we got to have a more aggressive reopening schedule. You ask a person, common sense, if you're a pragmatist, 25% will not pay the bills. It just won't pay the bills. So we're advocating for 50% over the next 30 days and 100% opening by Thanksgiving. And that's in a very careful, with the science the governor's put forth, important way. Nobody wants to get sick, neither the employees nor the guests of these restaurants and so on. We got to make sure that we're adamant about staying safe. We've given out nearly 1 million face masks, courtesy of the SBS, City of New York. We want to make sure everybody goes out there and does safe eating, safe serving, and so on and so forth. But that's an imperative to get our businesses back on track.
Well, clearly we hear your passion, Tom, about the restaurants, and I too love to eat. So this is very important to me. Like we need to go out and celebrate. But when both of you are talking about the chamber and what you do, we hope it's also educational for our audience to understand how much the chamber does. Like both of you touched on quite a bit, from advocacy to helping businesses start to, providing resources. So let's dig a little deeper into what you actually can provide for your members, so let's combine a conversation around what you highlighted, but dig a little deeper, especially in these times. How have you been able to support those who are members? Because we're from the ground up talking to our audience about the benefits of being a member. So when you talk about your resources, let's dig a little deeper on how that's actually making an impact on the small businesses and particularly MWBEs that you support.
So 90% of our members, and I'm sure Queenia has a similar, as the other chambers do, 90% of my members have 10 or fewer employees. They don't have a lawyer. They don't have an accountant. They don't have legal counsel on the staff. They don't have an HR specialist. So those are some of the services that we get, right? In 2019, we had 350 events. Some of them were as large as 2,000 people at Citi Field. Some of them were a labor attorney in a conference room here, right, talking about workers' comp law. And people say, all my guys are 1099. Really? 1099? You don't have them on the books? It sounds good on paper, right? But you don't have them on the books and somebody gets injured or hurt. There's laws in effect to help us, right? Workers' comp law is one of those things. You violate that, for example, you can be personally liable for somebody's injury and so on, right? So at the grassroots levels, we advocate for the education of people, right? And I'm sure Ms. Abreu does the same thing when it comes to things like educating their members. The world is so complicated today. I mean, I'm going to pass the baton over to her, and I'll jump back in again.
Thank you, Tom and Stacey. Yes, the chambers have played an instrumental vital role during this pandemic, for instance. And I mean, we do have our services all the time, but during this particular time, what the New York Women's Chamber did was really work with the state in developing the guidelines, making sure that the businesses were ready to open, because the guidelines were being, rolled out, in real time. And what we did was come in and say, look, we need, for instance, I mentioned the beauty salons. We need to open the beauty salons. I agree with you, Tom. Workers are essential and the businesses are essential. And that's one thing that we kept telling, the governor and the mayor. The businesses are essential in New York City because they are the economic engine of this great city. Without them, we don't have the number of employees that you mentioned, Tom. So we took it upon ourselves to even put out guides, our own guides, that went into, for the different industries, where we have to translate them to Spanish because they were not available, for instance, in different languages right away. Those came out later, but we wanted to make sure that our businesses were opening. So we did that. We also worked very heavily with the businesses, making sure that they got information on every grant that came out, every single grant that was available. We make sure that information went out, and we help them fill out the applications. We help them with the PPP, the famous PPP that everybody was talking about, that it was, so the information sometimes we're not getting to our people, and we make sure that they got that information, that they were able to work with the banks. We went and talked to the banks ourselves to make sure that they were providing the loans to our people, to our small businesses. And so all of that stuff, and we're still doing that right now. We're also pushing for funding. We're going, back to the state, back to the city, as Tom mentioned, to make funding available to our small businesses right now, because they need that. The businesses right now, all, thousands in rent. The one that owes less is probably, like $10,000-$20,000 in rent, and that's just a small amount that I'm talking about in comparison to those that own, that owe 40, 50, 60, even $80,000 in rent already and cannot pay it. So we have to find the money, and that's one of the things that we constantly do. The chambers is go out there, talk to our elected officials, talk to our to the city, the state, the companies, to make things available to our members during this time. Not only during this time, we do this all the time, not only during the pandemic, but today at this time, that's our role. And the businesses need to understand that also, and support the organizations that support them, support the chambers, because without their support, we don't exist. Also, all of the things that we constantly doing for them, we will not be able to do if they don't support the organizations like the chambers of commerce that are constantly out there being their voice, constantly out there providing the services that they need. We're it. That's what I always say. We're it. We're the ones that push, for instance, for SBS to do certain things. All those magnificent, wonderful programs that you see SBS, Department of Small Business Services, put out. It has to do with a lot of us pushing for that.
You make a great point about the triple P and so on, right? So I saw an interesting stat. The Treasury Secretary Nancy Pelosi came out, and listen, politics aside, I don't want to talk about politics. I want to talk about reality, right? For some reason or the other, whether it was a lack of access or so on, there's $380 billion with a B left over from the first round of funding from all sources, right? We're advocating strongly for the $120 billion Restaurant Act. My pitch to the leadership of our Congress, and I don't want to be so far above my pay grade here, but do the math, America. Do the math. Give me 120 of that 380. You still got plenty left over for the next round. That 120 can keep restaurants alive. That's designed just for restaurants. But you think about the treble effect, right? I'm a big believer in the pebble in the pond and the domino effect, right? I heard a celebration a couple weeks ago that the MTA ridership, subway and bus, hit 1 million. And they were all excited and cheering it hit 1 million. Before COVID, the average ridership was 6.5 million people a day. They're broke. I applaud the larger organizations in Manhattan, places like RXR, JP Morgan Chase. Lots of folks like to bang the big banks and so on and beat them up a lot. Their effort to get people in to Manhattan and to start working again would be a great shot in the arm for all small businesses, right? You got to buy a sandwich. You got to take a taxi. You got to get your dry cleaning done, right? I know some executives on Wall Street that haven't worn shoes and haven't worn a pressed shirt in 6 months. It sounds silly, but you know what? The effect on places like shoe shops and dry cleaners is unbelievable. Same with our restaurants. So I think we've got to lead. People like Mr. Abreu and I have to go out there and lead the way and let people know that this is the time they stand to be counted. When these restaurants close, they will never reopen again. There's nobody there to backstop them.
So, Tom, I just want to pause before Danielle goes to our next question. We have a question from the audience. Hey, Jason. Hey, Ann. Hey, Jodia. Thank you all for tuning in. He said, how will you make folks comfortable with coming into the restaurants after this 120 billion is issued? I think that's a great question.
So thanks to Queens' own Janelle Doris. You guys know Janelle Doris. He's the new SBS commissioner. Picked up the reins from a great guy in Greg Bishop. We were the central location in Queens County, and we still have some more left over if you need, of nearly 1 million face masks. And I am adamant, you can tell about the passion in my voice, I am adamant about, please don't open your restaurant and not have your staff wear a mask, right? I have kids. I'm a big believer in walking a mile in the other guy's shoes. If I'm going to go to a restaurant, I darn well better see the entire staff wear a mask, right? So we gave out nearly 1 million masks to these restaurants and others, retailers in Queens County, to open up. We also gave them some so that their customers would come in, right? We all know that it's a very kind of a funky disease and people don't really know all the ins and the outs, but it seems to be universally acclaimed that a mask and washing your hands and 6 feet will definitely help stop or deter this. If we're serious about being back in the economy, if you're serious about doing it, you need to follow those rules and regulations. And that's how I think, Jason's question, we make sure people feel good about going out shopping as we enter this really tough time of the fourth quarter of 2020.
And he had one more question, and I'll kick this one over to Kenya. Will there be advocacy for those businesses to have subsidies or forgiveness on their current and back rent lease obligations to keep them afloat during this COVID impact?
Yes, that is part of the efforts that we have taken, and it's pushing for that. We have a moratorium that is still in place, but we know that that's not enough because the businesses still owe the money. Even when when the moratorium is over, the businesses still have to pay that money. So we are pushing also for that. We're pushing for a solution where they can either provide us subsidies or that money comes out of the PPP, the money that is left over at the federal, where they can then use some of that money to pay the rent, because the PPP, most of the money goes to payroll. Which was one of the issues also, where our small businesses need more than just that. So we are pushing for the money that is left over at the federal level for a bigger ratio that would allow them to use some of that money for rent.
On that same topic, we are not proponents of the hashtag cancel the rent effort because it's a responsibility. People want to have people not pay the rent. Here's my perspective from Queens County. I don't speak for the entire city. Our landlords in Queens County, for the most part, are not Rockefellers. Mm-hmm. They're not, right? Not a bottomless pit of money they can just keep not having to pay their own mortgages, their city taxes. We've been advocating, and it's starting to work, right? Get the smaller size landlords that are generally moms and pops themselves. First floor retail, second and third floor might be residential. Get the group together as a landlord and as a tenant and say, listen, if the rent's normally $1,000, can you pay me $500? Can you pay me $700? And then work on forgiveness or rolling it down later in the road. I'm talking about 3, 4, 5 years down the road. People might say, oh, that goes past the term of the rent lease. I got news for you. This problem's not going to go away in a year. So think about, if you're a landlord, think about trying to do the right thing to not only help yourself get some common income, but think about your tenants, right? And tenant, leasees, tenants. These people have bills too on the other side, right? Try to have some common ground. Try to be good people together and not fight and sue, but sit down and try to find some accommodation, because if you throw those tenants to the curb, residential or commercial, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to replace them. And if you want to keep your business going, try to find a way to give the landlord a couple of bucks here and there.
Yeah, and some of them are already, Tom, some of them are already working with the tenants for that. But totally agree with you. The landlords are not getting right now a break from the city and the state. They also have to pay their bills. So I'm totally with you on that. We just have to find a solution where money comes in, where they can pay the backup rent.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I want to build upon the question that Jason asked in regards to making people safe. I know that, the 3 things that you mentioned, Tom, is the standard now, should be standard practice, right? The mask, the social distancing and washing hands. But as fall and winter happens and we may see potentially an uptick in cases, and you're advocating for restaurants to be fully open. I think something to be thought about is the HVAC, right? You got a lot of circulation of air. People are, 6 feet may not be enough, right? I know that you both were talking about a certain occupancy ratio of allowing guests to come in and eat. So what does that look like? Because, there's a cost. That's something that's extremely important. There's a significant cost in potentially retrofitting your HVAC system. And it's going to, in my opinion, it sounds like you're very passionate about the restaurant industry, but it's going to take more than just 6 feet distancing and social mask of the employees.
Danielle, I totally agree. And let me just say, to get on the soapbox, as a New Yorker, and so, I'm ashamed of some people in some pockets of our city, 5 boroughs, that are ignoring all these things, having to put social workers, cops, firemen. Now it's the sheriff. They've got the sheriffs out there trying to enforce 100, 300, 400 people weddings, activities, right? They should be shamed into saying, and I'm telling folks right now, you're not going to let all the hard work of 6 months, because some people choose to flaunt the rules. And I'm talking about, we did this after 9/11. You see something, you say something. At the end of the day, if you see a crowd of cars by a wedding hall, I don't care which group it is, which ethnicity it might be, we have an obligation as citizens to let the authorities know, because I'm not going to have our businesses go down the drain because somebody chooses to do something crazy. The cost for HVAC and so on, those are real true costs, right? And that's going to be a decision, a personal decision that businesses have to make. But I will again say, from right now, from what I learned, you keep the social distancing. They are telling us 6 feet. We're on calls multiple times a day. The masks are critically important, and the hand washing right across the board. I've never had my hands are all dry from washing my hands so much, and we go through masks like crazy, right? But at the end of the day, I think that's what we need to do. And again, once a business has some cash flow, right? I mean, we tried takeout and it worked for a little while, but we all know you serve alcohol in a restaurant, you make a lot of margin on that. You buy a bottle of wine for $7, $8, $12. You get eight servings out of it at $9 a pop. You're making your money on some of the alcohol, right? So at the end of the day, we got to be in it and start buying and going out. So the restaurateurs and the retailers, by the way, the others have a chance to make some money to start booking it and buying some of the equipment they have to buy.
So I have to just say this, Tom, respectfully, but I just want to be true to our audience members and be true to the question that Jason asked. What you just said, for me as a person that Stacy knows, you guys said today's my birthday. I'm not going to a restaurant
Understood.
On my birthday. I'm still not feeling comfortable. So I could definitely, I have an affinity to what Jason said. And in regards to the HVAC, it takes more than 6 feet distancing, right? If you're eating, you don't have on your mask. And so respectfully, I wouldn't feel comfortable based on what you just said, still sitting down at a restaurant over the holidays, knowing that is with the HVAC system, it's more than 6 feet. You could be 15 feet apart, and because the air is circulating, you can still get COVID, right? And we're all eating. We have our mask off because we're eating and we're engaging in conversation and eating.
The best part of what you said, is respectfully disagreeing, because you know what? I got it. I understand. It really is a personal choice, right? So at the end of the day, people need to be made to feel comfortable, but restaurants and other stores need to make sure they make people like Danielle Douglas comfortable to go out, maybe on the 3-week anniversary of her birthday on September 29th. We need to make sure people feel comfortable to go out and support our businesses, but not at any cost, right? Your health is very important. All of our health is important. So I hear you loud and clear.
And I'll just jump in on this right here, because we're positioning our company to offer some services to make people like Danielle feel more comfortable, which is outside of just the AVAC, but providing an actual service called fogging that can help every 2 weeks for businesses to be more confident about the environment. So there's work that can be done. And this is something that we're launching new because we see the need and we want our businesses to survive. We want our restaurants to survive. And it's not just restaurants, it's everything. It's daycare, it's beauty salon, it's every single place. There's a level of comfort that we all have to get through in order for there to be that influx of money into the economy. That's the real talk that we're having. So I'm glad to hear that the chamber, whether it be Queen's Chamber, New York Women's Chamber, that you're advocating for these things to happen so that businesses can stay open, which is an important part of our conversation today. Understand how to leverage your membership to help you survive COVID-19 and every other pandemic that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah. So Kenya, I do have another question because I know we're past the half an hour mark, and I want to get these questions in. And the other question I have for both of you, and I hear your passion for the restaurant industry, which honestly, I get it. They have really got taken through the ringer with COVID-19. But something else that is equally important that we've heard constantly, and that is how Black businesses have also really gone through the ringer. Bloomberg report, over 41% of Black businesses were no longer in March and April as a result of COVID-19. That is even Black Lives Matter was happening before COVID-19, but with the murder of George Floyd, it became even more highlighted, and the disparity. So when we talk about, yes, it's important to look at other industries, but when we talk about the impact that Black businesses have incurred as it related to COVID-19, can you talk to us about that as well, and how you've impacted and what you're doing for Black businesses?
So we've done a lot of outreach, both virtually and now in person, slowly but surely, as my Hispanic friends say, poco a poco, out in the field, little by little. A couple things about Black businesses, and you're spot on, Danielle. A couple reasons why they did not do well during this pandemic. They didn't have access to cash reserves. They just didn't have it, right? And when things got really tight and really tough, they didn't have access to banking relationships to be able to get that extra line of credit or that extra special thing. And so we're working with some of the banks to say, hey, wait a minute, these folks deserve your help as well. And sometimes as a banker, you got to take a couple of risks out there. And now is a great time. Lots of the banks did very, very well. As most people know, banks got a small piece of the proceeds for the PPP, for doing that in-between work between the Small Business Association, the SBA, and the individual people that got the loans. Now is the time for these banks to step up and open up their reserves and open up some of their lending to traditionally Black-owned businesses, especially.
So just to also share what's happening. It's really Black and Latino or Hispanic-owned businesses that are the largest number of businesses affected, and that we are very afraid that those are also largest the businesses that are going to be closing faster than others. And for instance, in the MWBE, we've seen how it's been affected, that some of the jobs have stopped. A lot of the construction, for instance, the construction industry, the jobs have stopped right now. We're working to make sure that the funding is coming to our MWBEs, because they need to be able to sustain themselves during this time, while the job is not, coming in as regular, or as I said, the jobs have stopped at this time, and we're pushing for some of those jobs to begin again when it comes to our MWBEs. And when it comes to just Blacks and Hispanic businesses, what we're doing also is working with certain organizations like LISC, to provide funding specifically to Blacks and Latino businesses right now, because as Tom said, they were left out. Those were the ones that were left out of the PPP, mainly when you look at the numbers. And so we're also working with them to make sure that they have their stuff in order, that those things that are preventing them from getting the PPP money and other sources of funding are in place, that they can now reapply for when the money from the PPP becomes available again, or other sources of funding, that they can apply and that they will be able to access that money. We're also pushing heavily for grants, specifically for Blacks and Latino businesses. We're pushing heavily for that, to create sources of funding just for those groups, because they really need it. Because as I said before, they were the ones that really were left out of the PPP.
Danielle, can I further that comment regarding MWBEs, please?
Sure.
So, I mean, I got to meet Dr. Grant through all of her hard work with some of the airport projects, right? It almost seems, it's just so sad that we all work so hard to build capacity for all these minority women-owned businesses, right? Over the last couple of years in anticipation of and executing on the airport projects. Through no fault of their own or the Port Authority or whatever else, right? This situation has occurred. Airlines are in bad shape. The Port Authority is in bad shape. No secrets there. But I think we have to also work. I learned a great word from Dr. Grant over the course of that time about building capacity, right? If all things were systems go before the COVID hit, the airports would have been done and built, let's say on the outside by 2025. What do all those firms do, right? They've learned how to become competitors. They've learned how to become business people, MWBEs I'm talking about, right? How do you build capacity so they can handle the current work and for the future, which is the most important part, right? The airport should not be a flash in the pan. I think we've got to find a way, and Dr. Grant, I'd love to sit with you sometime and some of the others and figure out a way up and until the airports get back up and running, and heaven knows they will at some point soon. We've got to make sure we have capacity for those folks so when other projects come through, you know, whether or not the presidential race goes one way or the other, clearly there's going to need to be a multi-billion, trillion-dollar infrastructure plan. Let's make sure that those folks that are doing those projects or rewarded those projects and have the capacity in the community can continue to survive and grow. They're the ones that I'm most worried about after all this hard time.
So, Tom, I'm gonna have you live up to that in the way that I'm actually doing a one-day virtual event called Black Business Owners Forum, Prime for Success. So I would love for you to be one of the partners and share that information, because it's all about building capacity. It's all about helping Black businesses who are in or were or are in a position to take advantage of opportunities like at the JFK Redevelopment Project to build their capacity on how to bid competitively and still make a profit, how to identify access to capital, how to build collaborative relationships like we have here with Queen Strategy Partners. So I would love to speak to you more about that. And we could talk offline about how that could happen, but also what I wanted to, in regards to access to capital, because that's huge, as you said, Tom, with cash flow in Kenya is, yes, lists, you talked about grants, they have been significant list organization and really delivering grants to different communities, business owners, and such as that. But the other thing is, how do you both partner with CDFIs? Because Tom, I know you spoke about the banks, but we know realistically that based on the type of businesses that you talked about, and restaurants and hair salons and small businesses that have less than 10 employees, and their banks are not necessarily the first line of defense. It's other alternative lenders like CDFIs. So I would like, as we talked about this and you noted cash flow is important, what type of partners are you working with to?
So we've got some CDFI partners like Pursuit, but I will tell you, an interesting thing that we have to think about all the time is we have a good friend in Greg Meeks, right? Greg Meeks has done some great work federally about getting access to capital to organizations. I think we need to hold the banks that operate in and around New York City, hold their feet to the fire as well, right? You just can't get a pass because it happens to be a CDFI, right? We should embrace the credit unions that are out there and the CDFIs as well, but we should not ignore the fact that some of these banks that have not stepped up, and by the way, I'm not a banker, I'm not getting paid by a bank here, but many of them have. But let's extend that more and more and lean on people like Greg Meeks so you can clearly understand where the gaps are and get them to focus on lending more to the community in general.
I can tell you that some of the CDFIs that we have worked with successfully has been VOC, the Business Outreach Center Network. I know they also have a presence in Queens. They have been very helpful in helping us get the funds, for instance, a PPP loan to some of the smaller businesses that were not being considered by the banks. MBE Capitals, I worked does incredible work with the MWBEs, and I would love to connect you both with MBE Capital, because their focus is mainly the MWBE firms. So organizations like those, Accion, who's also has been doing the PPP loan as well. Those are all organizations, CDF5, some of the credit unions, also as Tom mentioned, but those are some of the CDFIs that we have been working with to bring the access to capital to some of the businesses.
Danielle, to make a comment about your comment about the MWBs and the access, right? Public-private partnerships, which Dr. Grant has educated me and so many others on. When it comes to capacity, right? The Queens Chamber is advocating very strong for some private development, right? Lots of people are like poo-pooing it in certain regards about private developers, but among them are the LaGuardia Air Train, the Innovation QNS in Astoria, the Flushing Waterfront District, and your LIC, which has now got some problems because the mayor didn't come out and support it, right? But those are the kind of projects that our MWBs need to be primed for. Again, once the airlines come back and the airports come back, there'll be a limited time to get that work done, right? So they'll be able to do some work there. But in the meantime, we got to get them geared up for some of that private work and make sure that MWBs have a seat at the table for those private projects as well.
So Tom, and I'm going to let Stacy jump in because I know it's time, but I just want to build upon what you just said and respond to that, because we know that with the private development, they are not mandated to do the 30% NWBE, have 30% of NWBEs for contract dollars. So yes, those are opportunities, but when we talk about advocates, it's not just building capacity. It's going to have to be advocates to make sure that MWBEs are actually connected to those opportunities, and those opportunities are materialized to real dollars for them to sustain themselves, their families, and their communities.
So the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a few steps. Hi, I'm ready to start walking with you folks. I mean that on the private side, right? Because
definitely.
listen,
And I just, sorry, Stacey.
The state and the city
I
are
just want
broke.
to add to that what we have been doing, I'm part of the mayor's advisory committee for MWB, and what we have been pushing for, I mean, you saw the changes that he made, executive order with the chief diversity officers and every agency to make sure that they are really pushing for those contracting opportunities. And I'm going to invite you ladies also to do some roundtables with some of them. Because it is important to connect with them, with every agency. And one of the things that we ask is that for every project that the city has right now, that there is a piece for MWBEs. And the mayor has agreed to do that. So every project that it's there, that it's coming out, or that it's in existence right now, must have a piece for the MWBEs, and especially when it comes to the discretionary purchases that are up to $500,000. We're making sure we're pushing for that, even in terms of the restaurant industry, even for them, that every project, every opportunity that the city has for vendors, that it targets more than ever, that it targets our MWBE, and that it specifically targets Black and Latino business owners.
Okay. Well, Kenya, we know with the executive order that Mayor de Blasio just did, it's everything you said, but it's really tailored right now, if I'm not mistaken, towards things as it relates to COVID-19, right? Like those type of services. So it would be great if we could expand that as it relates to what you said. But we need to be clear that right now is what it relates to the COVID-19 and services.
And I think this conversation we've talked about so much, because there's so much to talk about in the rebuilding of the country. And of course, we're focused on New York because you all are here, Queens, and the New York Women's Chamber members are all over the city. And it's important for our MWBEs to view our show, to understand that there's a benefit to being involved with the chamber, because you have access to additional information. As they've shared, we have put up information about both of their websites. So I just want to remind you, you can visit the Queen's Chamber website and be able to get additional resources on what's available. You can go as well over to the New York Women's Chamber site and be able to get additional resources there, because it's more than just, you know, one time you find out information, right? This has to be a constant opportunity for you to get the resources that you need. So the Women's Chamber, the websites, both of their websites have quite a bit of information that is shared that you can go and on your own just kind of scroll through and see what's there for you and make the commitment so that you know that you have somebody advocating on your behalf if you make that decision. It really helps you to scale your opportunities. The networking alone, there's so many different kinds of chambers. You find the one that works for you. You're not in New York, we guarantee you there's a chamber of commerce in your city. So find out who's there. Showing up is 50% of winning. So when you show up and when you participate in these opportunities, you build relationships, and those relationships get you access to information. When you get access into information, you get access to contracts. You can start bidding. People know who you are. So every show that we have builds on your capacity to really survive and thrive post this new normal and this new reality that we're experiencing. So Jason asked some additional questions about restaurants. Stephen talked about the Community Reinvestment Act is a way to help keep banks accountable. So there's information out there. Jason talked about the airports and, you know, what's happening. So this dialogue clearly is ringing and resonating with each of you that are watching. The bottom line is there's a lot of work to do. And as business owners, as MWBEs, we have to be the ones to think with the new innovation to answer these problems, to solve these issues, and be at the forefront, as Danielle said, not just with lip service, that we want MWBEs to be involved, especially with private opportunities, but holding everyone accountable to bring in the most affected by this. Because the real reality is trillions of dollars are still being made in 2020. It is on who you are, what business you have, and how you've positioned yourself to be able to pivot. As we started this whole show in the midst of COVID-19, talking about pivoting, depending on how you pivot and answer the problems in the marketplace. So I'm going to let each of you give your closing comments before Danielle closes us out. But I want to thank you for being here on the show. For those of you that are watching, hey, Loria, thank you for tuning in. Stephen, we appreciate all of you. Share this with somebody. This show is about real-time issues with real-time solutions for MWBEs. Nicole, Danielle, and myself, we're walking the talk. We are a collaboration of 3 minority women-owned business enterprises that came together in partnership. You know, as we know, Kenya, who runs the world? Girls. But we came together in partnership because we understood that with our collective years of experience and our expertise, our collaboration could serve this marketplace in a broader and wider way by adding value by the model that we have created through a JV partnership. So thank you for sharing your insights about both of your chambers. I get to know and work with both of you. You're incredible human beings with compassion and integrity, and I salute you and thank you on behalf of Danielle, myself, and Nicole for being on our show today. So we'll give you some closing remarks, and then Danielle is going to close us out for today's show so she can go celebrate the rest of her birthday.
Since girls rule the world, I will defer to my partner in crime here, Mr. Brewer, to go last. I just want to say thank you. I loved your perspectives. It was truly an honor to be here. And listen, the journey has only begun in certain areas when it comes to business. If you think about what's changed from March 1st, which happened to be my birthday, to today, how much has changed seriously in our world that we never would have expected, right? We have to all kind of band together and figure this thing out. And what was old needs to be relooked at. What is new, we got to try to figure out. And I look forward to working with Danielle, Nicole, and Stacy, as well as Ms. Abreu, to kind of figure out what next steps are. And thank you very much for the honor to be here.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Stacy and Danielle. This has been wonderful, and to share all this information. And thank you, Tom, also for all your input as well. I really value that. And just want to say in closing that looking at what you ladies are doing in terms of coming together to provide services, to add value, as you say, Stacey, and talking about pivoting. It's not business as usual. And this is what the businesses need to realize today, that it is not business as usual, and that they, in order to stay afloat, to sustain themselves and to still grow, they need to look at that. They need to start looking at what other things can they do if their business is not working right now. Don't just wait around and wait. Just start looking at what opportunities out there, because the opportunities are there. Like you said, Danielle, there's trillions of dollars being made every day. So how can you access that? Look at how you can partner up with other businesses to add value to the industry, to the economy, and make sure that you find the resources, that you look for I mean, we have the resources in the city of New York, in the state of New York. You are not alone. If you are business owners, you are not alone. We are here for you. Just reach out. Just reach out. We are happy to help you. And again, ladies, thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Thank you to both of our fantastic guests. First of all, I want to say thank you to our guest participants, Aloria, Jason, for wishing me a happy birthday. I so appreciate that. So thank you. And I just want to say that, Stacey does this all the time. She says how fabulous stuff. She talked about the beauty of collaboration and everything. And there's nothing that I need to say to top what Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant said, but to say that we are committed to helping you business owners, one, pivot, build your capacity to survive, but not only survive, to thrive. And we will continue to show up. We will continue to try to bring great resources, great information to you. And what I always say as I part in my parting words is that knowledge, you may have knowledge, but it doesn't become wisdom until you apply it. So we will do our part. We just ask that you do your part. One, you show up from the ground up. And our part is that we will continue to provide you the resources and the tools you need to get to higher ground. So you all have a wonderful day as well. Have a special day as well. And until we see you again, make it happen and be productive. Until the next time.
Happy birthday again.
Happy birthday, Danielle.
And we'll see everybody back on the 13th. Next week, we don't have a show. We'll be back on the 13th. So set your calendars every other week as we close out the fourth quarter. It's Libra season. So right after Danielle, I'm coming up on Sunday. So the next time you see me, I'll be another year better. Not older. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Ladies, thank you.